Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. I'd like to discuss a video I came across called Life as a Spy Inside Al-Qaeda. In this episode of Minutes With, we sat down with Ayman Dean, a former member of Al-Qaeda who turned his back on terrorism and joined the British Secret Service. Ayman tells us how he ended up joining Al-Qaeda, how he met Osama bin Laden, and what made him turn his back on the organization. His journey from terrorist to a spy is an incredible one that led to Ayman being involved in the thwarting of a number of terror attacks. So basically, Ayman was a spy. He was a terrorist. He was working for Al-Qaeda. He was part of their organization. And then he decided one day he's going to turn against them. He's going to work with the British intelligence agencies to work against Al-Qaeda. And while I was listening to this, he made a very interesting point. And I wanted to show a correlation between the Al-Qaeda mentality and those who actually believe in Western superiority and colonialism and Western domination, and who believe in, some might say they're white supremacists, but not really. It could just be your average American nationalist, one who believes in Western moral values. And I want to show you a correlation between the two. Now, in saying this, as a Muslim, I personally do not defend suicide bombing. I believe it's abhorrent. Killing innocent civilians, for me, is defined as going to a marketplace, leaving a bomb there and killing men, women and children. This is against Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, do not kill women and children or the elderly and so forth. So you can't put a bomb in a marketplace, blow it up and kill your enemy combatant, saying that this is an enemy combatant when you're specifically targeting men, women and children, innocent civilians. So this is my opinion. This is, I believe, the most correct opinion, and I follow the Islamic scholars of Saudi. And some people say that's Wahhabism. That's fine. And I've looked at their scholarly work, and they've said that this is forbidden. If you try and do that to target the West, then that is forbidden. That's clear. Now, of course, the Al-Qaeda mentality is that no, as long as you're paying your taxes, if those civilians are paying their taxes and they're voting for that government, then they no longer become civilians. They become enemy combatants. I don't know how a child can be an enemy combatant, but according to Al-Qaeda, you can kill them, and that's just part of war. But I want to show you a correlation between the two, because I'm going to show you that the West actually believe in Al-Qaeda mentality. First, let's listen to what this spy says, and he will affirm what I'm saying. Let's have a listen.
Weapons we were constructing there. These are bombs or chemical gas devices to be left on trains, inside cinemas.
So is he explaining that when he was part of Al-Qaeda, he was testing bombs, and he was taught by Al-Qaeda to leave bombs in cinemas, in nightclubs, and on public transports?
Nightclubs. These are civilian targets, this is why we have the indoctrination lessons, the religious ideological indoctrination, in order to tell us that there are no civilians as far as our enemies are concerned. there are no civilians. So we have to redefine what a civilian is, to the point where we come to the conclusion that if you pay taxes in the West, and if you go and vote at the voting booths, then you are electing your government, which basically sanction the bombings against Muslim countries and populations, sanctioning the siege against Iraq and the killing of many hundreds of thousands of young children, or so the propaganda was at that time. So that is why we ended up coming to the conclusion, which is a twisted conclusion, I would say, that there are no civilians as far as the West is concerned.
What was the...
And of course, there's a refutation to this because, you have to pay the taxes in this country. You're not given, like I live in Australia and I'm forced to pay the taxes. If I don't pay the taxes, I can't live here. And so it's a compulsion on us to pay the taxes. So am I a target too by ISIS? Because I'm forced to do something that, of course those taxes might go and pay for bullets and tanks and ships to kill Muslim countries. But again, I'm forced to pay that. So I think I agree that it is twisted to say that, oh, you're a target because you're paying taxes. And the second point is when people vote, we don't vote because we want Muslim countries to get bombed. Westerners vote generally because they want good economics, they want, good human services for the people. They don't vote because they want to create the next war against Muslims. And if there are people who vote for people who do want to go to war with Muslim nations, let's say a president comes in and says, oh, if you vote for me, I'm going to go kill those damn, terrorists, or I'm going to go bomb that Muslim country, Iraq. Sometimes, the law makes it compulsory to vote. So how do you deal with that? And secondly, there are many people who are Australian or American or British who are against the war. For example, when the Bush administration wanted to go to war with Iraq, I think they did a survey poll and they were divided. So half the population said, no, we shouldn't do this. So again, how can Al-Qaeda or these terrorist sympathizers say, oh yes, they're all targets now, because half the population are clearly against the war. So I think it's unfair to call everyone an enemy combatant when there is a population who is against the war. So I think that's where the Al-Qaeda argument crumbles. But here is my main point. My main point is this. Westerners themselves believe in the Al-Qaeda and terroristic mentality. And I'm going to give you an example. I've actually dialogued with Westerners. And I spoke to them about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the Americans went and dropped a nuclear warhead on a civilian population. Almost 100,000 people died, and maybe a bit more. And for decades to come, their waters were poisoned. People have got still disabilities due to the chemicals that were radiated through that time. And many years to come, people have been affected by this. I've spoken to many Americans, many modern day Americans, and I said to them, well, isn't this terrorism? Because, you didn't get that bomb and target the enemy combatants, at a war camp somewhere to blow them all to pieces. You specifically dropped it on a civilian population in a city, and you understood that mass casualty was at stake, and you're specifically targeting civilians. And the response I got was shocking. It was exactly the response that Al-Qaeda gives. And they said to me that, no, there is no civilians because the Japanese government was voted in by the people. It was the people, it was the civilians that voted in a tyrannical government that was opposing the West, that was opposing America. Therefore, it's justifiable to drop a bomb on a population that it is men, women and children and civilians, but they're no longer civilians now. They are all enemy combatants because those people voted for that that Japanese government that is tyrannical and that opposes the West. Therefore, it is no longer terrorism, it is justifiable. It is a justifiable action. Can you imagine, folks? Imagine Al-Qaeda makes the very same argument. They say that the West, it voted in Western governments that went and bombed those Iraqis or those Afghanis. Therefore, Al-Qaeda members say it is now justifiable to kill their civilians because they're no longer civilians because they pay their taxes and they vote for the government. Do you see where I'm getting at? So I see that there is a complete hypocrisy or a double standard. Otherwise, if you want to be fair, then as you call Al-Qaeda a terrorist organization, which you rightfully should, and I agree that it is a terrorist organization, then at the same token, you need to be open and frank and say that your Western nation bombing Japan was none other than a terroristic ideology, mentality, and a terrorist act. Let's see if you can be honest with that. So if you're a true American patriot, then be fair and label that an act of terrorism. Don't ever try and justify what you've done with that bomb on a civilian population to say it's now justified, because your very enemy, the Al-Qaeda, is making the very same arguments. So if you want to justify Nagasaki and Hiroshima, then Al-Qaeda have got every right to justify the terrorist attacks in September 11 because, according to them, they seen you use money and weapons through the Trade Center, through the wealth that you've developed, to fund Israel, to kill Muslims and so forth. So then, according to them, then their actions are justified. So let's see if you can be consistent. Let me see if you can actually be consistent, or will you continue to be a hypocrite and defend Hiroshima and Nagasaki and say that was American patriotism, that was defending our human rights and our justice, and it was good for the world, it stopped the war and whatever. If you want to justify it, then Al-Qaeda can justify their atrocities.